I'd taken my brand new Ford Bronco I just bought 2 days prior out to Alpine County for some off-roading. I was traveling solo. After a day of hitting some of the good trails near Bear Valley, I pulled into a dirt lot that was at the mouth of one such trail to grab some shut-eye. The type of Bronco I have is a Badlands, and I had just installed a best top, which I left open so I could lay on my back and stargaze while sleeping. I set an alarm for 5 a.m. since I had to make it home before work, then reclined my seat back, threw on a blanket, and drifted off to sleep. I found myself awake at some random time of night. I checked my phone and saw it was 2:30 in the morning. I didn't know what had woken me up, so I turned on my side to try to get back to sleep. And that's when I started hearing something disturbing. There was a voice echoing from somewhere in the forest. I say it sounded disturbing because it didn't sound like someone talking or calling out. I strained my ears to listen. It was undoubtedly the voice of a group of men, a lot of them. They were all saying something in unison. A cold sweat started to form on my body. Let me reiterate how deep into the wilderness I was. There was no hiking trails or lodges anywhere near me. There's no way a group of hikers could have just been out there without a flashlight. I just sat there praying they would go away, but the voices only got louder. I could now distinctly make it out to be a group of 5 or more, hell 10 or more men, repeating something over and over. It almost sounded like they were chanting. It sounded like they were now somewhere in the lot. There's no way they would notice my vehicle. I lay there too afraid to move a muscle. The fact I didn't have a roof made me just feel all the more exposed. I knew it was way too dark for them to see through my windows, so I was hoping they'd just move on. Just as suddenly as they had started, the voices stopped. Now the only sounds were the forest. Then I felt my heart leap into my throat as the sound of metal scraping metal erupted from right outside my vehicle. The awful sound seemed like it was going around the perimeter of my Bronco. I knew I'd have to make a move for the driver's seat. It didn't help that I was laying opposite to the driver's seat either. All while this sound went on, I was mustering up the courage to turn on the flashlight next to me. I figured if they realized someone was inside, they might get scared off. So I devised a plan to aim the flashlight out the roof, turn it on, and then jump to the driver's seat. I placed my finger over the button and counted down from 10. As I reached 1, I clicked it on. And to my heart, I was staring back at the face of a man in a white hood peeking over the side of my roof. I screamed so loud you could probably hear it for miles and scrambled to the driver's seat. I hit the engine button, and as the headlights flicked on, I was met with another disturbing sight. There were a dozen or so men in white robes and hoods just standing all around the lot, looking at me. I threw it in drive and floored it, nearly ramming into one of them as I tore out of that lot as fast as I could. I could only go so fast down the dirt roads, but thankfully I don't think anyone was chasing after me. Eventually I made it back to a paved road. I drove for a few miles and then had to pull into a lot to clear my head for a second. While I was doing this, I got out of my car and took a look around. There were long scratch marks all around the perimeter of my vehicle. It was completely ruined. It looked like the marks were made by some kind of blunt object, like a knife or something, and someone had been dragging it around the sides of my Bronco. I managed to find a proper motel to spend the night at, but I'd be lying if I said I got any sleep that night. I did end up reporting it to Forest Service, but I think they pretty much just brushed it off. It had been a fun night out with my friends. We hit a few bars and then had dinner, then called it a night at 11 p.m. I was making my way back to the garage I had parked at, and there was no one around. For context, I'm on the bigger side, so I wasn't really afraid of being alone in the city at night. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor where I was parked. As I was walking, I heard a loud cough. I turned around to see some guy in a red hoodie lingering in a corner. Figuring he was some tweaker, I started to turn before he would notice me, but it was too late. He saw me and started walking over, waving his arms. I sighed to myself, here we go. He called out, "Hey buddy," but not in a particularly aggressive way. I kept walking, but he went around me. I was shocked to see him up close. Remember how I said I was on the bigger side? Well, this guy made me look like a twerp. He was huge. He had to have been standing at least 6'7" because he towered over me. He was probably late 20s, Japanese, with a black beanie and a red hood pulled over it. He had a tattoo on his cheek. I also instantly saw his hand was concealed in his sweatshirt pocket, and I could see the outline of something in there that wasn't his hand. It could very well be a knife or gun in there. He starts rambling up some story about how he just got out of prison and his girlfriend had changed the locks in their house. I didn't look him in the eyes for more than a second the entire time he talked. He didn't look like your average tweaker. He had this very lucid, stern look on his face, if that makes sense. I tried to politely tell him I had to work the graveyard shift and started to step around him. He suddenly became angry and shouted, "No, you gotta help me." I frantically reached for my wallet and pulled out $20, which was honest to God all I had on me. He snatched it out of my hands and stepped closer. "Is this all you got, man?" He reeked of piss and cigarettes. I told him yeah and tried to step around him again, but he moved once more to block my path. He broke into another rant about how terrible prison was. Then he looked me straight in the eyes with just a really concentrated expression. He didn't say anything for about 4 seconds and just stared very seriously at me. Then he started muttering things under his breath. I couldn't make out most of what he was saying, but I heard some of it, including comments such as, "I always try to tell you, but you don't listen. I don't want to hurt you again," and so on. That last comment shook me to my core. I genuinely didn't know what to do, and then I heard someone yell, "Hey!" Me and the guy both turned, and there was a security guard down there. I looked back at the guy, and he looked at me. Then, calmly, he turned around and stomped off towards the elevator room. I went straight to my car and drove home. To this day, I still think about what could have happened if that security guard didn't show up when he did. There was a brief time period where I was basically living out of my car due to a financial situation I was forced into, the circumstances of which I'd rather not talk about. This one night, I was parked next to a large reservoir surrounded by woods during this torrential downpour of rain, the biggest storm of the year, in fact. For the record, I'm a very light sleeper, so it wasn't uncommon for me to randomly awake at night and have no idea what could have woken me up. That night I awoke at some ungodly hour, as per usual, immediately seeing nothing out of the ordinary that could have woken me up. I flew to my side to face out one of my back windows towards the tree line, and that's when I first heard it. I could clearly distinguish it over the sound of the pouring rain outside. Whistling. Someone was whistling some creepy tune from somewhere around my car. I sat up in bed and looked around. The whole parking lot was empty and I couldn't see anyone at all in the lot, not out by the road or by the tree line. But then again, I couldn't see much at all because it was raining so hard and this lot was very dimly lit. I listened some more and tried to pinpoint where this whistling could have been coming from, but it seemed to be echoing from all around my car. There was something about the whistling, too. It didn't sound like some harmless person out for a stroll. The pitch and the melody they were whistling, it just didn't sound right. It sounded like the person doing the whistling was hunting for prey. And then it started getting louder, closer, but I still couldn't see anyone. I decided I wasn't sticking around to find out who was making the noise. I jumped into the front seat and started the engine. Knock at one of the back windows. Slowly, I raised my eyes to the rearview mirror. There was no one there, apart from the pouring rain illuminated red by my taillights. I got the hell out of that parking lot and found somewhere else to sleep, not looking back. For this story, my name will be Elijah. This happened to me last year on a cold night in February. I still get chills and feel sick when I think about it. Me and my then girlfriend, whose name I'll keep private, used to go on drives during the night a lot after our dates. There was something about just going straight home after a date that didn't appeal to us. As a result, I would often take us on long drives all over, whether it be through the bustling downtown or the roads up in the hills off the beaten track. On one such night, we were driving around the hills. We hadn't seen a single car out there. From the second I had picked her up to go out that night, we had been extra flirtatious. It was probably because of our conflicting schedules over the past week and a half that had prevented us from seeing each other. Whatever the case, I ended up pulling into this secluded little parking lot I knew of, encased by a forested area, so we could get some privacy. I'm sure anyone can imagine why. We parked, reclined the seats, and got to doing our thing. While we were doing our thing, my phone kept buzzing in my pocket. The fifth or sixth time it happened within 20 seconds, I got so annoyed I took it out and tossed it to the passenger seat. I kept hearing it go off, but I didn't let it distract me. At some point, we took a break to fix our hair. I was on top of her in the passenger seat, and as I sat up, I remember sensing some movement to my right. I turned my head to the driver's side window, and I kid you not, there was a man there. He had his face pressed up against the glass, and one hand cupped around his eyes like he was trying to see in. I got a good look at this guy from where I was, even though I didn't see him for that long. He looked utterly insane. The tip of his tongue was hanging out the side of his mouth, and he had bloodshot eyes that looked like he hadn't slept in days. Most disturbing of all, he was holding a phone up to the glass, like he was recording us. I shouted, "What the hell are you doing?" as my girlfriend screamed. He turned around and started running. I flew into a blind rage. Fueled by pure adrenaline, I dove out of the passenger side door and started chasing him. He had a good 10 seconds on me, but I was able to follow the outline of his figure even in the dark. I chased him all the way across the parking lot before I lost sight of him as he entered the woods. I slowed down to catch my breath as I entered the woods. I was sure I'd lost him at that point. I almost considered turning around when I started hearing a noise from the bushes nearby. It was laughter. Not a silly kind of laughter. It sounded like the laughter of a downright insane man. I pushed through some of the bushes towards the laughter, and there he was. The guy was just standing there stiff, facing me. I noticed his clothes were completely coated in dirt and mud. He was just staring straight at me, grinning ear to ear and laughing. Words can't even describe how crazy his laughter sounded. It sounded like he was choking, not laughing. Seeing him staring at me like that honestly made me lose any ounce of confidence that might have remained in my body. I turned around and started walking away with haste. Then came the scream. He screamed so loud, I swear the crickets stopped making their noises. And with that, I broke into a sprint. I came running out of the woods and into the parking lot, screaming at my girlfriend to pull the seats back up. I jumped in, started it, and floored it out of there. And as we were pulling out, there he fucking was, just standing by the tree line with his mouth hanging open and watching us drive out. I gave him the finger, but it didn't seem to faze him at all. That was when my girlfriend showed me what was on my phone. It was over a dozen airdrops from a random number. They were all pictures of me and my girlfriend in my car, taken from different angles around the car. This guy, who must have been living in the woods or something, approached our car and took 15 pictures of me and my girlfriend having sex. I felt awful. I felt completely violated. Police were contacted, but nothing ever became of it. I haven't been back to that area since. The worst part of all of this is knowing that that guy is still out there, and presumably still has those pictures of me and my girlfriend on his phone.